Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of That Annuity Show. And this one, I promise you, will be energetic and different. Ramsey, do you want to set us up?
Absolutely. So we are very lucky to have Sara Grillo back on. Sara Grillo, who goes by the nom de plume, the leopard of LinkedIn. Sara is a strong voice in the space. She challenges norms, and we're really delighted to have her back on. We're also joined today by Scott Salaske from First Metric, who has been a partner in Sara and some of the recent messaging, particularly around direct indexing. So we're looking forward to a lively conversation today. We're going to talk about direct indexing, but I really hope we can talk first about the position that both of you have taken, which is to question norms in the name of sort of moving the industry forward. So thank you for that in advance. So with that, Sara, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I wasn't thinking I would talk about myself because it's so boring compared to the lively debate. I was ready to knock down industry norms, dude.
All right, fine.
I'm a marketing consultant. I help financial advisors market themselves without the usual crap. But there's a lot that goes into that. It's much less exciting than having a real rumble here. So let's rumble.
All right, go for it. All right, so then, why don't we get right into it then? So what are some of the key? First of all, why have you chosen?
And sorry, Scott, can you give us some background on yourself and your company? I'm the
CEO of First Metric, a financial advisor. I manage investment portfolios and provide financial advice and guidance, mostly in the areas of retirement planning. I've been doing this for over 20 years. Prior to this, I was a partner in a low-cost investment management firm primarily, and we did some basic planning. And I was there for about 15 years, sold my interest, and took some time off and went back to, again, promoting the low-fee concept and making sure everybody gets fair advice at a fair price.
Thanks.
And he's transparent about it, too. For example, I love Scott's website because it says, first of all, he actually has a fees page on the website. He actually discloses the fees on the website.
And they match the ADV.
And they match the ADV, which is a bonus. So I find it ironic, and this is going to get it. This is where I really want to just cut people, because I love it when everyone's virtue signaling on Twitter and on social media and on their websites about we put the best interest of the client first and we're transparent. We're a fiduciary. We're transparent and clear. And then it's no fees on the website. And I mean, and I'm not one to shut my mouth. I mean, I'll tell if you're a client of mine, I've probably said this to you before. You're not transparent if you do not tell people what you're charging for your services. And it's so obvious, but it's I want to give them the opportunity to get to know me before I tell them how much I cost. We all know why that is, because you kind of want to manipulate them by making them feel like they like you before you tell them how much you cost, right? And that's one of the things I just want to get away from. But I love Scott's website because it says, our fees are simple to understand. $495 monthly fee for ongoing investment management, retirement planning, and financial advice as needed. Boom. That's the fees page. There's no this is what financial advisors do. They do a range. Okay, so some financial advisor will be in a conversation with them and be yo, you got to put your fees on your website. Well, I don't want to do that. And then we kind of tussle about it. And then they're okay, I'll put it on. So then they're okay, I'm going to say the range. It's 75 basis points to 1.5%. And I'm oh, wow, that's transparent, actually. Yeah. So totally, for no specificity of where I would fall within that range or what's the basis of it or fees based on complexity. That gives me no clarity, right? So I love this simple, clear message that he takes, and he does that in a lot of the things that he does. He's no BS like me. That's why we're like rebel pals. Like I'm probably like the head rebel out there, like taking heat every day. Can't stop putting my foot in my mouth. Like just like, yeah, there was one day that I think all anybody involved in finance did on social media was rip me. Like it was like, I think it was a Saturday, right? That I posted something. I went to the beach and I come back and like I seen like whatever, like tens of thousands of people here on Twitter. Anyways.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about that, Sara, because you serve the advisor community. They're your clients. And you can see a world where somebody might sort of tread lightly in a space where they're likely to sort of look to be sort of controverting some of the messages that their clients are putting out. So what made you decide to be that person that's willing to stand up and do that? And how have you been able to sort of navigate the inherent conflicts that come up with some of the people that you either do serve or could serve?
Well, I just made a decision that I'm not serving anybody that doesn't operate completely in the best interest of the client. And I know that there are different takes on that, but I think that financial advisors are very biased. Even some of the better ones are very biased in how they see things. And because I'm not the one that's charging the money for the services, I'm a little bit less biased than them. And I'm not interested in contradictions. I'm not interested in ambiguities or confusion. I'm just not interested in anybody that is not going to, with absolute clarity, be supportive of ethical and transparent practices in all aspects. And if they don't want that, then they don't have to be my client, because there's enough advisors out there and I know how to market myself. And I'm there for my message to reach the people that want to do business that way. I'm not in the business. I don't want to promote your practice. If you're one of these people, if you're going to be out there wanting to manipulate people, don't come calling to me, because I'm not interested in talking to you. In fact, I'm interested in developing talent that can come and kick your butt. That's my whole goal. I want to lift those up who do right by the client, that aren't going on likability. And then I want to lift those up that are willing to be transparent and clear about what it is that they do, who they are. Because, see, I know who I am. I know who I am. And I will go broke over that. Only I would never go broke, because if I ever didn't have a career in financial services, I know how to market, and I could go into any other industry and do the same thing.
Yeah. Well, you've maybe we stop and unpack it, because Sara, you and Scott have brought up a couple of issues that are real interesting in there. Now, I don't know if Ramsey, if you know this, one of my odd jobs along my career was running the compensation and recognition for one of a big insurance company, and I think we paid out like $1 billion a year in compensation. It was a lot of money, and during this about 2-year period when I was doing this, we had a requirement. I'm trying to think if it was how many states this came through. We had to do commission disclosure in a number of states, and I will tell you, everybody when this came out on the management team sort of had a collective, swallow. Like, what are we going to do here? And Scott, what I found when we actually talked to advisors was the best advisor said, "This isn't a big deal, Paul. We'll put this statement in." I said, I have no problem. My clients know what I'm getting what they're charging, and they see value in it. I mean, Scott, does a good advisor, if you have to disclose your comp, does that really slow down a good advisor from building a relationship with a client?
No, not at all. I mean, at the end of the day, as Sara mentioned, I disclose what I get paid. It's right in front and center on the website. And also, that's what I personally done for 20 years. Even at our other firm that I was a partner in, it was full disclosure. I mean, our fees were right out there, the services we provided, service I provide today. So it doesn't impair anybody's ability to be ethical and serve a client by putting your fees out there. That's what you need to be doing. So, I mean, the people that are not doing that, I mean, I've heard all kinds of excuses for why they don't do that. Most of it is what Sara mentioned in the beginning, which is, I got to get to know you and see what you need and what value I can provide. And it's all that value word. Every time an advisor is approached about fees in any capacity, if they're not in full disclosure, it's always, well, it's about the value I delivered. Well, why should you be compensated based on the value. I mean, when I hear value, I hear numbers. I don't hear like, you're providing retirement planning or financial advice in this area or managing their money or whatever your services is. I see basically when I hear that, I hear, well, the value is I save my client X number of dollars in this tax transaction, or I save them this much in low fees, but yet I charge them high fees for my own benefit as an advisor. So when you don't get compensated based on the value that you've saved somebody or that you added in hard dollars, you get compensated based on the service you're delivered. And most advisors are not in tune with that today. I think it's pretty simple, but that's why they don't disclose the fees.
Yeah, and Sarah, compensation structures, fascinating. Okay, we can go as deep as you want to go on this. I think this is an interesting topic, and this is a little bit of a rhetorical question, but go with it here, which is there such a thing as a bad compensation structure? I mean, in itself, here's my structure. I'm disclosing to Ramsey. It's bad. Is there such a thing as a good and a bad by itself? In your mind?
Yes, high fees are bad.
High fees. Yeah.
If you look at what the impact is over time on a client's wealth, high fees are bad. And the issue is that there's a lot of kind of smoke and mirrors marketing. It's not just the disclosures of the fees as much as that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors marketing that goes along with the whole package that most retail consumers don't have the time or the wherewithal to decipher. And that was one of the topics that we were going to discuss later that we'll get to it in one of the products that Scott and I particularly are not fans of. But it's not just the fees. It's when you charge a client a high fee, a lot of times the way that it's justified, a client is unable to really distinguish because of the very sophisticated and I believe somewhat manipulative marketing techniques that advisors are taught from the jump, from the time that most of them got into the industry. And I wish that it was just, we could say, oh, well, those were the advisors that started out with the brokers. Those are the advisors that started out in the wirehouses of the insurance companies. But guess what? I see it in today's new age advisors as well. I see it in the next generation of financial advisors, and the whole thing makes me sick.
All right, so a couple things. One, Paul, I would say that there's certainly a lot of bad sort of compensation structures. I think the challenge is figuring out, what are the ones that are perfect. The question is sort of what are the ones that have, that minimize that minimize conflicts. So, I mean, Sarah and Scott, so what are any compensation structure creates some drag. That's just the way it is. But, presumably that drag is well worth it relative to all the other benefits. So what are the good structures? What are the best structures that you see out there right now?
Well, I mean, if I'm speaking, I think that basically the most unconflicted one to some extent is hourly, but then that has a different set of issues we can talk about. But I think the next is kind of the flat fee. Here's our services, this is what we're delivering. But at the other side of it, then you start moving up from there. The most non-transparent, the most subjective, based on the services you're getting, is you're getting into either AUM-based or some combination of AUM and planning fees, either by the hour or a fixed minimum fee. There's all kinds. It's not just, what I'm seeing too is it's not just one fee. Sometimes it's, here's the AUM for the investment management, and most of it's the typical 1% give or take. Then you've got the planning fees, which are really murky. You read some of these ADVs, and they'll go on for 2 or 3 pages just describing their planning fees, this minimum and that minimum, and we'll charge hourly if you don't have this criteria. If you're not an investment management client, we're going to charge you more for planning. So it all comes back to they want to earn a certain amount of money per client, and however you get there is based on this complicated grid most of the time in the ADV. And these ADVs, I mean, it's not clear. You read them, even a basic AUM advisor is charging a 1% fee, give or take. They get 3, 4, 5 pages of disclosures. It's you list your fee. It's item number 5 on the ADV. It's pretty basic. You don't need more than a couple paragraphs to describe your fees, and I think that's the problem. So hourly, get back to your question, Ramsey, is I think the least conflicted, but unfortunately, most of the time that's not fair to clients and advisors, because a lot of times advisors don't bill for all their hours that they're putting in, and a lot of times clients don't want to call the advisor for the advice they need because they're going to be billed by the hour. So it's kind of a problematic model, even though it's probably the most transparent model.
Yeah, well, Scott, you kind of touched on another factor, right? One is conflict, right? Ramsey, you brought up. Second, Scott, is behavior you want to encourage. Behavior on the client side, behavior on the advisor. And I think of like annuities versus fee-based advising, Fisher investments, oh boy, there's Sarah, there's a topic we'd love to get into. Yeah, like, okay, let's buy an annuity. Okay, 7% commission sounds like a lot compared to, 150 basis points or 200 basis points. Okay, but then fast forward 10 years, which was the right number. Now, what did the client need? Did the client need advice once and done, or does the client need that interaction over the course of 10 years? Scott, what gets and drives the right behavior with the client and also with the advisor? I think you end up in the answer isn't as straightforward sometimes as you'd think. So, I'd throw the time factor in there to think about, and I also think focus on behavior and outcome goals. What structure really does align everybody's interests over a period of time.
Well, the problem that I see it is that most of the time the advisors are not asking the right questions. I mean, when they are talking to a prospective client, they should be not immediately, but within that first conversation, someplace, whether it's 10, 15 minutes or a second conversation, more of an introductory call, ask the potential client flat out, what are they looking for? Why did they contact you? Are they looking for an ongoing relationship? Are they looking just to ask one question and be done with it? So there's different kinds of relationships, I think, that can be formed, but unfortunately, most of it is just assume that, you bring a client in, you're going to charge them the AUM fee, whether you manage the money or not. Here's the whole, 100 different services we offer. And at the end of the day, you might need one, you might need two, you might need three, but they throw the kitchen sink out there. And the reality is I've never in 20 plus years ran into somebody that needed probably more than 5% of the other 95% of the crap that advisors list on their website, if they list the services. So the ones that do, I read some of these things, and being in the business for 20 years, I don't even know what those things are they're offering. It's just industry jargon that's not industry jargon. So it's just, at the end of the day, getting back to your question, Paul, it gets back to, yes, there could be one-off advice that's needed, but most of the time, people that are seeking the help of an advisor typically want an ongoing relationship, and then it just comes down to what's the best way to engage the advisor for that relationship. And the industry has always been that traditional, AUM fee model. And, obviously we all know why that is. It's, ingrained in there, and advisors are making a lot of money. They've designed their whole business around that. They're not going to just flip the switch and go to hourly or go to fixed fee and upend, years of building this annuity stream of income by the AUM fee. So I think that, we're battling sort of an uphill battle here, but on the other side of it is, people need to be aware of this. They need to be, told about this every single day, and then they can make their own decisions. But when people are in the dark about there's other options available out there, it's not just the typical, again, AUM model with some planning fees attached on top of it, that there is these hourly models, there's the fixed fee models, and we can get into whole different topics, but I can kind of go on forever, but I'll kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, Sarah, how do we get better transparency on websites? Is this something the regulators should step in to do? Is it something that should be built in an ethics code of ethics? Is there, some stamp you get on your website and you'd only get it if you meet the following, set of criteria on what you disclose?
Oh yeah, the regulators. They're, heavily lobbied. They're working for us, man. Are you kidding me? How can the regulators? First of all, they don't have the capacity, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't even have the capacity to catch all the crooks that are out there to begin with, much less worry about what are on people's websites. All right. And then like the CFP board is not going to enforce it because they would lose too many clients, and they're down with whatever anyways, right? Like they're not taking a stand on nada. And, neither is the SEC or any of them, because quite frankly, there's too much money. Like Wall Street has too much power to have the regulators go against them. And they know that they're very complicit. I mean, if you look at the lobbying, it's just, there's no way we can rely on the regulators. What I'm trying to do here is I think the better thing is to educate the consumers, because as much as financial advisors will say, like, we want transparency and, we're transparent and, we're open about everything and we are an open book. Okay, well, you know what? You're not, and you're never going to be, because there's too much to be lost for you doing that until it gets to the point where clients are going to your website and then not contacting you, or contacting you and saying, I'm not meeting until I know this. And it has to happen because what has to happen is that other advisors who are transparent have to change the tides. Like that has to become the norm, that advisors are going out there, and because clients like it when they have this information, because it puts them in control. The advisors, most of them, never going to give it up. Much as they say they will, never going to give the client that power. The consumer has to demand it. So in some of my efforts, what I'm doing is I'm going direct to consumer and advertise, like not advertising this, but like, sorry, that's the wrong word, but like, and trying to encourage them, when you work with a financial advisor, don't do anything with them until you have this information.
So I want to I want to sort of get a little more granular on what the catalyst was for having you on, which is your views on direct indexing. So we had you'd made a post, I guess it was on LinkedIn. You talked about direct indexing, or maybe it was an Advisor Perspectives. And, it's something that you and Scott worked on together. And what impressed me about it was that, pardon me, that in your analysis, you actually, went down several layers in a way that I just haven't seen very much outside of an institutional setting. So I grew up in an institutional setting. So everything that we touched was torn apart, either by us or by somebody that was challenging us, you name it. And I found in the personal finance space, things sometimes stay a little bit high level. And you really sort of dug deep on the specific challenges that things that you had issues with direct indexing itself, and how it's used as a tool, as I guess essentially as a marketing tool. So why don't we get into that? What first drew your attention to direct indexing, and then get into what do you think are some of the problems with it, or at least the way it's implemented?
Direct indexing sucks. And I realized that when I started just seeing all of these vendors on LinkedIn being like, direct indexing is the new thing. And then I read a little bit about it, and I'm like, this is the old thing, but with a twist. And then I started posting about it, and then like some kind of irreverent, rebellious postings about it. And then Scott was like, have you ever thought about this or that? And I was like, wait, I got to talk to Scott. And then we did this podcast on my podcast, and then basically tore the whole, and then I was like, I have to write an article just tearing this to shreds, tearing it to pieces and decimating it, so that no one who is within my sphere at all will feel at all positive about the prospect of ever laying a hand on this.
Okay, so obviously you have a strong opinion about it. What are some of the things, Scott, what are some of the things that stood out to you as non-optimal about direct indexing?
Well, I mean, the non-optimal part is, again, people should be, for the most part, trying to simplify and understand what their investment portfolio looks like. And when you go with something like direct indexing, it doesn't really matter what index you're following, because they're not really following any index, but we'll just say the S&P 500 because everybody's pretty much familiar with that. When you go and you buy 500 stocks or some sampling of that, but let's just stick with kind of the 500, you could just go buy one index fund, for 3 basis points at Vanguard, or you can go buy 500 stocks. This wasn't really possible before, because there was a trading commission, even though it was small, to buy these individual stocks. And then also the second part of it is a lot of the custodians and the providers that are offering this didn't have the ability to offer fractional shares. So you would have to buy whole shares. The portfolio would be out of sync and a number of other problems attached to that. So really the no commissions now on trades and the fractional share open the floodgates. And I personally think that the whole reason that this is occurring, and I'm with Sara on this, anytime I see everybody moving in the same direction, my red flag goes up immediately, whether I know anything about the topic or not. I want to investigate it. Well, I already knew about the topic in this case, so my red flag just continued to stay up. And the issue became, at the end of the day, why are we moving in this direction? Why are advisors that typically, again, fees aside, but why are they moving in this direction, especially advisors that would typically be putting clients in to basic plain vanilla index funds? And the only reason that I could come up with this from the advisor standpoint, but then there's the provider standpoint as well. The advisor standpoint is, complexity to some extent, solidifies a relationship forever, because, when you're having a provider provide a direct indexing solution, you're using somebody like Schwab or Fidelity or some of these other ones. There's called Just Invest that Vanguard bought. There are a dime a dozen now out there. They're the back engine, the technology that's driving that. So, the advisor is not managing 500 stocks. They're not picking this. They're not managing these portfolios. That's another added fee that's on top of the advisory fee. And then when the client decides, I don't want to have direct indexing, or I want to change advisors for one reason or another, now they have to continue to find another platform that's going to be able to manage these 500 stocks into this index. And it only comprises one portion of the overall portfolio. We're just talking about U.S. large cap stocks at this point. I mean, what are they doing for the rest of the portfolio? That's a whole different topic. So that's, I think, why advisors want it. And I think the way the providers are looking at it, especially Vanguard, in their purchase of Just Invest and, others that are getting into it like Schwab and Fidelity that are coming out this month in June, is because they've realized they're not making any money on index funds and everybody's moving there. So let's give them kind of the same thing, call it direct indexing, confuse the hell out of people. And now at the end of the day, you have index funds still, but we're doing it with 500 stocks. So, that's just a bunch of BS. At the end of the day, go buy a Vanguard S&P 500 and call it a day if you're going to just have large cap exposure.
So the thing we didn't do, and so apologize for not leading off with this. Can you define direct indexing? Because not everybody in our audience may be familiar with it. So how is direct indexing different than regular indexing?
You want it, Sara, or do you want me?
No, you talk, please.
Okay, so I'll give you the simple version. The simple version is direct indexing is supposed to, first of all, it's been around forever. It's just kind of renamed now to, again, ride the coattails of the indexing sort of revolution, I'll call it, where everybody wants to lower their costs, be in index funds, and pick up on this. So it was used to be the separate account management platform, SMAs in the past, now called direct indexing. And all it is active management, because at the end of the day, all of these providers that are offering this, also with the encouragement of the advisors, are offering, yes, let's start with the S&P 500 as an index, but now you can tailor it to whatever you want. So it just becomes plain old active management, stock picking. You're just starting with a basket versus not. And I think the indexing name on here is misleading. It should just be like custom portfolio or whatever you want to call it, but it's not indexing at the end of the day. But the idea is, in the past, there was a few firms years ago that this was used for a very specific purpose, and it was typically around people that have had like concentrated stock positions because they're C-level executives at public companies, and a lot of their net worth is tied up in that. So they could weed that stock out if it's part of, let's say, the S&P 500, or if it's technology, you can kind of weed out the whole technology sector, so you don't have that call it extra exposure, because you already have a lot of your net worth in company stock. And when you follow an index like the S&P and you eliminate one stock because you work there with this giant exposure, or like a whole sector because again, that maybe that stock's not in there, but you got enough exposure to something like technology, it works great because you're following the index and it's for that portion of your portfolio. But what Wall Street product machines have done is they've now taken that concept and are marketing it as that, but it's all smoke and mirrors because we're going to let the client customize it for ESG or their own preferences for whatever reason. And all of a sudden you don't have the S&P. You just have a basket of 200, 300, 400 stocks. And over time, it just looks different, more different, and different. And not to mention all the tax nightmares that are attached to that we can talk about.
Let me touch on that. I'm familiar with direct indexing. It was particularly something that was discussed a lot, in the early days of the robo-advisors. And usually the use case that was most often cited was efficient tax loss harvesting. So tell us about that. Tell us why, what the argument is around whether or not it is more efficient to from a tax perspective to direct index versus owning a regular index fund.
I mean, how much tax loss harvesting do you really need? Like, you need to do it every day? I don't get it. It's just kicking the tax can down the road. Because when you own 500 stocks, yes, you might be able to net gains against losses initially. But after you're done with that, the stocks are going to appreciate in value. So you're going to be left with like 500 times the issue, because over time that portfolio is going to grow. And then what are you going to do with all those gains?
So is this something that is this part of the puzzle that has become sort of overtaken by all these other reasons that you had mentioned? So I appreciate what you're saying, Sarah. Like it's essentially a tax deferral strategy, right? And so sooner or later you do have to pay those taxes. But is it? It sounds like to me even that argument has become sort of overtaken by all these other rationales or incentives to encourage clients to focus on this strategy. Is that fair? Is that a fair comment?
It's a fair comment, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, voices like ours just get drowned out because we're competing with multi-million-dollar marketing engines.
Well,
it's hard. It's hard for the consumer to ask these questions because they're not being presented with the full story. And the other issue is I don't even think many advisors have thought this through. What is the full cycle of the product? And we see this over and over and over again with Wall Street. We see it with interval funds, closed-end fund that invests in liquid instruments with gated redemptions. There are advisors that will tell you that securities that decisions that were made by another financial advisor and then the client came to them and it takes them 2 years to get somebody out of an interval fund. It's just the mistake that we keep making over and over and over again. And it's time. This is, maybe we're off key here. All right. But there are many more questions about this product that I haven't even gotten to. And my whole point with this is advisors, don't just kick the tires, kick the windshield, kick the engine, kick the transmission, kick every aspect of the car that you're about to get into with your client. All right. And that's what they're not doing. And I think it's because it's the short-sightedness. And this is why I don't see advisors really being that bastion of stability and strength. And I think that this reputation is unfortunately catching up to them. But I don't think that that's a bad thing, because I think the advisors who ask these questions should be the ones who are trusted, not just the ones that you meet at the golf club that are the most likable, or that will go to your kid's high school graduation, or that'll hold your hand during the market downturn. I mean, all of that's standard stuff. But this is rare. I think that's a problem. I think that's where the industry has fallen down over and over and over again for the consumer. When is it going to stop? It's not stopping. It seems like we're just reinventing ways to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, well, Sarah, you and Scott have touched on one issue I've had a lot of discussions with people about in the business, which is what's the most valuable role an advisor can play with a client, and yes, you could be a money manager, but Scott, right, a whole different set of skills than somebody, Sarah, who is, and I'll change it just a little bit from likable, somebody who actually knows Ramsey, has long-term relationship, knows how to keep Ramsey doing the things he should be doing, saving money, not acting on impulse. Those are two very different set of skills, and I'm not sure, is it possible to be a wonderful money manager, Scott, take advantage of this amazing technology at the same time and manage a relationship? Is it even possible, Sarah? Is that possibly what is causing a lot of angst here? And I understand why why you would be concerned.
Well, I think what's going to happen is if you look at the younger generations, it's starting with X and Y and Z, or it's continuing. Consumers are much more independent. And if you look at one of the movements that I'm involved with that is really coming up is called the advice only movement, of people that are just offering planning and are not getting involved with any of this stuff. They're teaching the clients how to handle these issues on their own instead of making them dependent. I think it's going to be very hard if advisors cannot do all of those things that you said. This is what I see as the value of the advisor, because a lot of the things that advisors get paid for, the clients could do themselves, but they're not encouraged to, because that would interfere with the advisor's ability to get their 1%. I think 1% is going to be languishing. When you look at Generation Z, these are the digital natives. They're anti-Wall Street. They're anti-corporate. They're anti-everything. Okay, I think it's going to be very difficult for advisors who are going to make excuses or are going to play dumb, so to speak. I think it's going to be very hard for them to service these younger generations. And now, I mean, I'm not talking to the 60-year-old advisor that has just made his or her practice and isn't willing to change. And those people will probably be okay, fine. But if you're looking at any point, if the generational wealth transfer comes down, if your clients pass away and inherit, and if you're planning on being in the business for the next 10, 15, 20 years, this kind of attitude has to stop, because they're going to laugh in your face. There's guys right now that are doing advice-only planning that will train you for $6,000. Cody Garrett's going to charge you $6,000 over 3 months to train you how to manage your money, plan your finances, and then you are done. You can come back for some maintenance, but he's educated you on how to be your own financial advisor. How are you going to compete with that? Cody Garrett he's killing it. He's murdering. And it's not broke Gen Z 15-year-olds. It's baby boomers that come to him and say, I don't know, the last 10 financial advisors I talked to won't tell me how to take Social Security until they get their hands on my money. I mean, these are people with millions and millions of dollars that are looking for this kind of thing. It's not just the kids with the baby money. It's people with serious money. I encourage totally that kind of a thing.
So, I mean, it's interesting. There's a couple of things there. One is it feels like maybe there's scope for sort of unbundling, right? So the archetypal financial advisor, wore a lot of hats, or still wears a lot of hats, and maybe there'll be more sort of separation. There'll be some that do what you say Cody is doing. There'll be others that will still do the wealth management, and then consumers will be more picky about what they choose. Which leads me into the second thing here, is that at the end of the day, Sarah, is maybe competition will take care of this, right? Maybe those that adapt will succeed. Those that find their niche in any one of these sort of, I'll call it service verticals, and others that don't, will sink or swim accordingly. So, I mean, I'm curious about, whether or not you think that, like, sort of, I like to call it the gravitational pull will kind of take care of all of this over time. Either one of you, any thoughts?
I mean, my perspective is yeah, I think it could, but it's going to take an awful long time. We'll probably all be dead by the time that happens. I mean, because the way that I've seen the advice only that Sarah's referring to develop here is that it is younger advisors that are doing it, and they only have so much bandwidth. I mean, they can only work with so many clients at once, and then when one client leaves because they've now been educated and they're going to go manage their money and do the stuff that they've been advised on, then you'll have room for another one. So there's a capacity issue with the current advisors that are doing it, and then the other advisors that have been in this industry for a long time, as I mentioned earlier, have no desire to change it, mainly because of compensation, but also the complexity that they've built into running their business and practice or whatever that they've developed, and how they provide advice to clients. So I think that it's an uphill battle, and gravity will move in that direction. But even 20 years ago, I mean, nobody was talking about low fees 20 years ago. Nobody was talking about really index funds for the most part 20 years ago, even though Vanguard existed and had a handful of index funds. So, it took about 20 years for people now to be somewhat open to, we need to pay attention to the fees on our investments a little bit. And, Vanguard offered all these funds, and now a lot of them are index funds, and people can go and get low cost funds. And, a lot of them are in 401ks now. That's how a lot of people really got educated to indexing to begin with, is just using some of the index funds in 401ks. But it took 20 years just to get to this point, and we're just scratching the surface. So, like I said, we're all going to be long gone and dead. But yeah, I think gravity will pull people in here. The internet was a big thing 20 years ago. People couldn't go research this. Now you just get online and what's the price of this fund and this advisor. You try to, if you're motivated too. I think that's the important. The client has to be motivated to, want to find out the fees and want to find out what they're paying, not just investment products, but to advisors. But I think back to your question, Ramsey, are the advisors going to be open to offering this, and is gravity going to pull them in that direction? Yeah, maybe to some extent if it's just a marketing piece. I mean, what I'm also seeing is a lot of advisors that, are really have no desire. You can tell by the way they market their business and what they offer. They have no desire to go this way. But again, they want to make sure that they're not losing out or have a different perception. So, we'll add this other sort of pricing model on. We'll call it fixed fee or flat fees, but it's just an AUM model. And it's back to Sarah's original point is, it's anywhere from 75 basis points to 1.5. And once we figure out what we want to charge you, sure, then we'll put it to a flat fee and say maybe we'll revisit it every year and this and that. But at the end of the day, it's just AUM being called something else, so they don't, again, lose out on the marketing side of it.
Yeah. Hey, well, listen, really good discussion. We're really, Ramsey, at the top of our time. Did we hit the issues you thought we should in this call?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Well, I think we hit a lot of them. I think this is a debate and a discussion that doesn't really have an end. And Scott, I'll take your 20 years and I'll raise it to closer to 50. In terms of like the rise of index funds. So, John Bogle spent, most of his adult life preaching the benefits of index funds. And a lot of people heard him, but like the transition, the relative market share of passive versus active, it took a long time to sort of cross the 50% mark. In my lifetime, most of the time when people ask me for investment tips, it's usually, it typically has been buy Burton Malkiel's book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, read it, do what it says, right? And call Vanguard. And what I found though is that and this is sort of my only pushback here, is that for some reason as humans, investors, consumers, et cetera, always want to feel like they're doing something else. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the question that always comes back after following that sort of protocol I just said is, they will say, well, what do I do now? They always want to do something different. They always want to pick a stock. They always want something that feels a little bit special, a little bit different. And so, there's part of that makes people vulnerable, right, to maybe not getting the best possible deal. But also, I think there are some people that won't settle for not having that. So there's a behavioral piece here that I don't know that is easy to resolve, which is why I said this is a conversation that will go on for many years.
Yeah, well, listen, Scott, Sarah, it's great to have you here. I feel like we cut this far too short. Sarah, I want to get you back. You've got so many good opinions. Love to follow you on LinkedIn. Other than LinkedIn, Sarah, any place people should follow you to sort of get a perspective of what your opinions are on a number of these topics?
Well, I have a newsletter, and I publish it probably about once a month. They just go to my website. They can sign up for the newsletter. But I really love it if they could follow me on LinkedIn and just send me a DM and say hello and participate in my discussions. I really love having the discussions. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Great. And hey, Scott, how about you? LinkedIn as well. Do you have a newsletter people subscribe to?
I don't have a newsletter, but yeah, LinkedIn is a good place.
Okay.
Twitter. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and Twitter, so those are great places to start and get my views on the world. And as Sarah knows, I'm not quite reserved on those platforms. So.
Good. Like to see discussion started and get activity and good thoughts. On some important topics that sometimes get pushed pushed beneath the headlines. Too complicated to fit in a paragraph. So, all right. Hey, listen, thanks so much for joining us, Ramsey, Scott, Sarah. We want to thank our listeners. Send us feedback. Tell us who else we should have on the show. And join us again next week for another episode of That Annuity Show. Thanks.